Hello everyone, this is Nate Cothran from Backstage Library Works. Thank you very much for attending today's RDA in Practice webinar. This is the second in a series that we hope to present to you, hopefully inform you along the way. We have 60 plus libraries that we're talking about today with 60 plus million bibs enriched. Does that mean we have 60 plus options? Actually, no, we have about 32. In our online profile. We have a lot of sub-options though, so maybe. Through this webinar, we wanted to open the doors for your questions. So feel free to ask questions as we go, and we'll address from the chat box on WebEx. We should let you know that some members of my team are assisting with questions from behind the scenes in case there are particular details that I may not readily have at hand. The other thing I wanted to do with this webinar, at least right now, is to show you briefly our online collateral, just show you around, let you know what's available, and give you a quick demonstration of the online profile itself. And then we can jump right back into the presentation. Okay, if that worked correctly, you should be able to see the online profile for RDA. It says sample institution, RDA enrichment profile. So we have 6 different steps, kind of just hovering over the different steps that we have. And that's what we'll be talking about today as far as what our clients have filled out for each one of these steps and how the results, I guess, have happened with that there. Okay, so I'll just, as a quick example, just fill out some things on the first step. And I'll just go over here real quick. If you look there, this just shows you a quick synopsis of what we ask for during each step of the profile, and we hope that it helps our users fill out the profile as well as making an informed decision for that particular question. And they can type in what they want, and they say, oh, I didn't want to do that, so maybe we'll put it here instead. And we could say, please process okay. So they can save that section in the profile. And I just want to show you the summary. We'll update to show you exactly what they have or have not chosen. So everything that we just did in the first step is now reflected in this summary tab. And then the other options, there's a lot more that we have not done. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let me go ahead and stop sharing the desktop and go back to the presentation. Okay, so a little bit of background here. RDA Day 1 for authorities started March 31st, 2013. And a year ago, actually this month, in December, Backstage conducted a survey on RDA interest for our existing clients. Based on the results from that survey, there's about 14 or 15 questions that we had there. We had around 85 to 90 respondents there. But based on the results from that survey, we offered free RDA enrichment to all of our existing active clients. And in a couple slides, I'll show you what that turned out to be. But the other thing here I wanted to mention was the comparison between 2013 and 2014. So in 2013, the Day 1 for authorities was announced or officially endorsed by LC. I wanted to show you the interest that we have had from our clients, from our new clients, as far as embracing RDA enrichment on their records versus 2014. So this is with our existing clients. In this year alone, we have so far, because we still have a few libraries that want to do their processing by the end of this year, but so far we've had 32 clients. They've run the gamut from all types have been represented. Less than a quarter were run in the first 6 months, and then over 30 million records were also processed in the last 6 months, and that's quite a number there. But can you think of a reason why there would be more in the second half of 2014? And I think there's about 3 reasons that we could probably attribute this to. One would be timing. It could be that some were hesitant to jump in right there, and they wanted to see what others were doing. Logistics, especially with large files, you had to worry about how you're going to export that out of your system, import it back in. You had to set aside a certain amount of time to do so. Maybe you had to check with your ILS vendor and try to figure out at least what schedule they could give you. It could be that you had to wait until a certain time of the season or the end of the year to do that kind of processing. One other factor is testing. We had a lot of samples that we ran for some clients. They wanted us to test different kinds of scenarios or record sets, and so sometimes we applied different profiles based on the records that they were sending in or the different file types. So with our new clients, though, the previous slide was with our existing clients that we offered the free RDA enrichment. With the new clients in 2013, we were slightly hobbled, by that first quarter of 2013 because LC had not officially endorsed RDA yet until basically the beginning of the second quarter. But in 2014, 99% of the records that we processed included RDA enrichment. So it gives you perhaps a better idea of exactly how many clients are deciding to go forward with RDA enrichment as opposed to holding off on that still. And you can see 93% of clients, so basically those 2 other clients that decided to hold off, they had a combined total of around 200,000 records, so that might give you an inkling there. What we were looking at here, as far as this webinar is concerned, we're only looking at clients that have completed the full RDA enrichment on their catalog. We have had actually over 100 clients fill out our online RDA profile, but we're only including the retrospective enrichment libraries for the following results. The breakout of the libraries for these 60+ libraries, it was 34 academics, 6 publics, and 21 specials. So special libraries are defined by where they do not necessarily fit into either a pure academic or pure public library type. And these would be your consortia, law libraries, or similar institutions, corporate, museums, etc. And true, some libraries within specials happen to be academic or public, but this is how we parse the results for this webinar. Now, the plan is to present to you the results of each of these different library types and what they collectively chose while filling out the RDA profile. And comparisons will be shown between academics, publics, and specials. The hope and intent is that this may give those of you that have not yet pursued RDA enrichment a chance to view what other libraries of your similar type have already embraced or chosen. We'll cover the first 3 steps from the online profile. Then we'll have a quick break for any questions that may have arisen while we review the results, and then we'll proceed from there. Okay, so let's get started. So sending files through the Backstage website can be a convenient way to track the processing of those files. And files can be segregated by job type, and attaching files is similar to attaching files in an email. However, some libraries prefer to send files through FTP, and one of the main reasons for this is they may already have processing scripts on their side which are easy to kick off and can communicate directly with Backstage's FTP servers. MARC 8 uses 8-bit characters, which can be a limitation when tackling diacritics or other non-spacing characters. UTF-8 uses 16-bit characters, and this allows for a much more robust set of characters that can both be defined and displayed for different character sets. And whereas MARC 8 uses special escape sequences for different types of characters, UTF-8 natively handles those characters. I don't know if that makes sense there. Our authority control process can handle files which contain both MARC 8 and UTF-8 records, so that's not a problem for us there. Okay, for this question here, there's essentially two categories that we're considering, RDA and non-RDA. And RDA bibs contain an 040E RDA. And RDA enrichment is really an attempt to hybridize non-RDA records by adding RDA elements. With the actual RDA records, we do have some minimal level validation that can occur for those particular types of records. The advantage in receiving all bibs is primarily tied to whether there is a stamp or indication in the record that it has been processed by Backstage. Some libraries prefer only changed bibs sent back since it likely makes for a swifter or faster download and ingestion back into their system. So this slide gives you just a quick overview to show that academics are largely choosing to have all bibs returned while publics and specials are more split on that. Building off of that last question then is the Backstage stamp that we offer. And libraries are free to choose whatever they want. One thing I did not mention in the profile that I should have was that there is no wrong answer on our online profiles. It's set up in a way such that our clients can enter whatever they want. And if there's any clarification that we need, then we can go back to the clients and ask them for their interpretation. So it seems only natural that most of our libraries would choose the modifying agency in an 040 field to be added as one of their stamps. This lets other staff members know who last modified the record. Next, we can also update or add 005 for latest time of transaction, or we can add a 9XX field letting users know which records have been enriched with RDA elements. And these stamps are very helpful, or we'd like to think they are, when clients want to pinpoint certain kinds of updates from Backstage, such as records that were sent for processing, records that were updated, and records that had RDA enrichment applied. Including this kind of information may make it easier for our clients when putting together reports for their own needs or to present to supervisors about what transpired with their processing. Even though this is RDA enrichment we're offering, we do like to start off with also including AACR2 enrichment as it makes sense for our libraries. We can make over 100 different kinds of changes to the bib records, and this can be completely customized per library. Most, however, as you're going to see in the next couple of slides, most of our libraries are actually choosing to do everything that we can. And in 2.4, which is the step that we're on right now, or at least, sorry, the stuff that you see in the middle here, the subfield updates and deletes, we always recommend to retain relator terms. With AACR2, it's perfectly okay to strip those out, or at least it was acceptable. With RDA, we want to retain those, so we make sure to emphasize that while filling out the profile. Including AACR2 cleanup and validation, it helps our programming because it's easier to latch onto, especially if there's more correct cataloging standards or practices that are in place for your records, and it's easy for our system to latch onto those correct cataloging standards. So we do recommend running step 2 to our clients. And as you can see, most of our clients that have chosen the RDA enrichment have chosen to do everything that is possible. So the GMD standardization here, AACR2 terms are more strict than common terms. For instance, audio cassette is still an acceptable common term, though AACR2 would update this to sound recording instead. And to give you another idea, there are about 33 AACR2 terms and about 75 accepted common terms. So common is much more forgiving on what's acceptable. The processing can also add or remove square brackets around the GMD term as desired. Most of our libraries are choosing AACR2 terms and adding square brackets as necessary. Okay, now we're starting to get closer, and actually from this point on, we're going to start talking a lot more about specific RDA elements or policies or formatting that can take place with your records here. So the first little bit that we just went through is just kind of a preamble or introduction kind of a thing to get to this point. And while we do, of course, still include that as part of the profile, this is where we start off here with the RDA enrichment. In fact, when I participated on the hybrid post-implementation BIB record guideline task group back in late 2012, one of our recommendations was to retain the GMD until March 31st, 2016. And if that date sounds familiar, it's because it's 3 years to the day after RDA Day 1. The hope was that by that time, ILS vendors would be given enough time to make better use of the data in the 336, 7, and 8 fields, the content media carrier. For now, most of our libraries are choosing to retain their GMDs. So that might be an issue if you're thinking about doing the enrichment and wondering whether or not you should still retain that GMD. Karen Anderson, our authorities librarian, spent just countless hours and days researching our options for this particular part. This is the GMD to CMC conversion processing. In fact, we've devised over 1,400 rules that govern the GMD to CMC conversions. We account for AACR2 terms, common terms, and even records that do not contain any GMD terms. We can customize this too. Recently, we had a client ask that we add a 340 field with subfield N that says large print, and also a corresponding subfield 2 that says RDA. And they wanted to do this based on if there is, based on the presence of an 008 by 23 with the value of D. So if that form of item said large print, and they wanted that indication also in the record. The reason why they wanted that is it's not necessarily easy to tell if the work is a large print from the 33X fields, at least not so far. As you can see, at least in this slide, nearly every one of our libraries who chose to do the RDA enrichment retrospectively have fully embraced adding the 336 and 7 and 8 fields. Okay, so we did want to do things a little bit differently with the questions. We didn't want to get carried away with going throughout the webinar without and ignoring any kinds of questions that you had as they came up. Okay, so we did have one. I had a couple questions on here just in case we didn't have any questions, and I still wanted to address those as well. But we do have one from Rich Paul. If it's okay for me to say that. His question was, do you anticipate another round of processing to scrub GMDs from records after that 2016 date? And that's a good question. I don't think that we do. One of the options that we do have with the GMD processing, though, is that we can move existing GMDs to different fields. So those can be moved to a 5XX field or 9XX field, and your system, your ILS, can still make use of those just in a different location. And nothing is currently planned on our side to actually do another round of processing to scrub those GMDs from our clients' records. At least with GMDs, the hope is that the ILS might have some global match and replace tools that might make it easy or easier to search for 245 subfield H, for example, and just remove that completely from the record. Okay, so one question I wanted to pose was, why aren't we adding 040E RDA? And some of you probably already know the answer to this, but the main reason why we're not is because with our rule sets, or at least with our options that we have in the online profile, we adhere as closely as possible to Library of Congress policies and standards, as well as the Program for Cooperative Cataloging, PCC, policies and standards. And PCC currently recommends that if you're doing a machine conversion or RDA enrichment of your catalog, that you do not add the 040E RDA. And the reason being is that we do not have the source item in hand. And so there are certain assumptions that we have to make based on the data within the record. And since we can't consult the actual work in hand, some of those assumptions may be incorrect. And so unless the record is being physically redescribed by a cataloger to RDA, then it is recommended to not add 040E RDA. Also, Backstage adds one set of 33X fields. Why are we not adding more than one set? We've had a few libraries who have asked us that. Let me kind of go and read a couple of things here. First, let me tackle the multiple set of 33X fields here. Just as an example, I wanted to show you this. I'm going to read something from Karen Anderson that she had a response to one of our clients, and I thought was worth including for this webinar. But real quick, just to help illustrate what she's going to be talking about, there are 5 different content types. The content would be in the 336 field that map to the leader byte 6 if you have an E or an F value in there. And the resource should only be one type. With the item in hand, of course, it's much easier to add the correct 33X or 336 field. But without it, we need to look at a hierarchy of fields instead. As I mentioned earlier, we had over 1,400 rules. We have 1,436 to be exact. And to give another example, at least with the cartographic material, that has 54 dedicated rules all to itself. So there's a lot of different variations and a lot of different things that we look for in order to find the best, most correct set of 33X fields to add to your records. And then these other couple of bullet points at the bottom here, those are the actual fields we consider while determining the proper set of 33X fields to add. And if it's okay, I do want to read just a quick excerpt from what Karen had written regarding the GMD processing. So first we look for a GMD, but something like electronic resource doesn't tell us what the content is. So we'll look at the leader byte 6 to determine the 336. Then we look at the 007 and or terms in the 300 field to determine the media and carrier, since there are several different types of these. It could be computer disk or online resource, and that could be possibly defined as an electronic resource. If the GMD is cartographic material, there are 5 different terms for the 336 that fit, with the leader byte 6 if it's E or F. So we looked at other codes such as certain values in the 008 or terms in the 300 field to try and specify. So for every GMD, there are lots of permutations of 33X fields that are possible. The problem is the record doesn't always have the necessary codes or terms to tell the computer what the item actually is, or, and this is what we run into sometimes too, the codes aren't correct. Sometimes the 007 and the 300 terms don't match. One is for a different format, such as a document on a computer, and the 007 may be coded for the computer, but the 300 field is describing the document using pagination. So it's very difficult to find an algorithm that can handle this consistently on our side. For instance, is the leader byte 6, if it's M, then it has been used at times for anything to do with the computer. And it's very difficult to know when it wasn't used for an actual computer program as it's defined now. But we really have tried to cover as many of the permutations as we can, and that's why we have about 1,400 plus rules here. Okay. So, I don't think I see, let me just check here. I don't think I see any other questions for now. And if there are, and if I'm missing them, we'll hit it in the next Q&A period. Okay, so next, let's consider our descriptive field updates as well as our access point updates. Originally, our profile intermixed some of these options, but we realized that it probably made more sense to keep them separate in our clients' minds. For instance, some clients may prefer to make changes to their access points to prepare them for authority matching, but then not necessarily feels confident about making, just the descriptive field changes. So while most academics are choosing to do all 245 updates, about a quarter only want to do certain updates. Of these quarter, there is a unanimous agreement on changing et al. To and others, which we have to say is quite gratifying at Backstage, because we have spent many sessions debating back and forth exactly what this particular rule entails and what it does not, as far as how far should we go on this before we start running into situations where we're introducing errors. And so it's been nice that we have a lot of buy-in, at least so far, from the academics on that, and we'll see how the publics and specials feel too. So by contrast, though, publics and specials are much more undecided on how much to update in the 245 field. In addition to the et al. Change, though, publics are most interested in making sure their parallel titles are properly represented and moved down to their own 246 fields. Specials aren't as keen to move their parallel titles down to 246 fields, though there is still that complete consensus on changing et al. To and others. So the kinds of changes that can occur in this step are mainly spelling out abbreviations in 250 and 255 fields. As an example would be spelling out 1ST to first, or ED period to addition, those kinds of changes for the addition statement. We've also added 14 additional language abbreviations to check for in the 250 fields, such as Danish, French, Slavic, Spanish, those types of languages, or we have a list of those that where we look for those common words like revised or edited by, and then if it's in that language and it's abbreviated in that language, then we expand it or spell it out. With the 255 field, we can update CA period to approximately, as well as make sure we have the right spellings for ascension and declination, those types of updates. But we don't do any kind of updates to the 255 subfield D. Just wanted to point that out. So we treated the actual 260 to 264 conversion separately, and you're going to see that in the next step. This one is dealing with certain updates that you may or may not wish to make to existing 260 fields. And since there is so much, there really is a lot that we can update here, it kind of does make sense that we're not going to have 100% buy-in from our clients on everything that can be done. They're going to be a little bit more, I think, choosy as far as exactly how much they want to explore. Across the board, though, it does appear that the first two options and the second to last option are the most popular to consider for our clients. And that's so far with the academics, that was the case, and now with the publics as well. And in fact, for the 260C and subfield G updates, we break that out into a subset of options for our clients, which this next slide helps to illustrate. So this particular option opens up a lot with most of the changes actually occurring in the 260 subfield as opposed to the subfield G as well. But academics are choosing to expand abbreviated months, but hesitating on changing the C to copyright, which I found quite interesting there. So only less than half want to make that change as far as the copyright symbol. Another important note, I guess, is that please note that 53% of academics are choosing to add that date of publication not identified in brackets for missing publication dates. And the reason why I want you to take a look at that is look at how the publics and the special libraries almost completely differ on that particular option. So the publics are embracing copyright changes, but they do hold back on spelling out abbreviated months. And contrary to academics, none are choosing the date of publication not identified as an option. And just, I guess to give you a reason, the PCC recommendation is currently to do the one above that, which is the copyright 2001, goes to the bracket 2001, comma, copyright 2001. Specials are in consensus on the CA dates, and what to do with the missing pub dates as far as with publics, but show the same kind of reluctance as academics with copyright date changes. They're a little bit more keen to do that than academics are, though. Okay, so now this is the 260 to 264 conversion. And just to let you know, as you look at this slide, I did not transpose the number for specials. It really is at 38%, where you see the publics were at 83%. But another thing, converting the 260 to 264 is actually more straightforward than we initially thought it was going to be. The complexity is introduced when we're trying to determine the correct indicator value based on whether the imprint is for a production, publication, distribution, or manufacture. When in doubt, our system defaults to publication. And if we were designated as a copyright date, so it was a 264 with a second indicator 4, and a copyright date. That's really trivial to do that compared to trying to figure out if it's a production publication, etc. Okay. So for physical description, 300 field updates and changes and spelling abbreviations, we offer the option to change your update abbreviations in the extend information. So, you know, frontis to frontis piece or PP period to pages, those kinds of changes. As well as with physical details, B&W to black and white, or SMD to sound, similar types. As well as dimensions. So inches to IN period, or CM to CM, no period. In fact, CM is actually considered a symbol, and it's not an abbreviation. So CM does not get an ending period unless there is a 490 in the record. So that's kind of one that we found interesting, and we thought, why does this sometimes have a period at the end and sometimes not? And Karen did help us understand that one quite well. So real quick, what does the SMD stand for? We've had clients ask us this, and a GMD is a general material designation. SMD is a specific material designation. So an example of a GMD would be electronic resource. Corresponding SMD might be magnetic disk, so it's more specific. Another SMD example, very generic GMD would be map. SMD could be atlas or model or remote sensing image or something like that. Now, for this particular question here, since part of this option includes generating an 046 field from the 100 subfield D, I want to take a quick look at an example of what this means on the next slide. So the idea is to make the dates for personal names more machine readable, and this may or may not help. And it might help for BC dates or those types of dates as well, where they're more questionable. To put it in there. So let's just go back to the results. But as you can see, not too many libraries are actually choosing to do this. But adding the 38X fields can be very useful for libraries with large music collections. And that's somewhat reflected here by these results, by which I mean that our libraries that have enriched their records with RDA elements also tend to not have large music collections. But still, roughly a third of our libraries are adding these 38X fields. And this option allows for specific abbreviations to be spelled out in 500 or 504 fields. And not too many academic libraries are choosing this, but those that do tend to feel safer in selecting the 504 field. And it could be that for this particular question, we don't have a default answer or option highlighted in our profile. We don't say, okay, we recommend doing this. This is an option that some clients have expressed an interest in. And PCC currently recommends to not expand the abbreviations because there's so much variability that can happen in the 5XX field, specifically the 500. Another thing to keep in mind, the 502 conversion is separate. So it's a separate option within this question. But just over a third of academics are choosing to convert their 502 fields, which essentially that breaks up each discrete set of information into its own subfield. However, publics are electing not to do any 502 conversions, but half of publics are making all available 500 and 504 abbreviation updates. A third are choosing specific updates, and most of them, and of those, they're choosing, both the 500 and the 504. And specials, on the other hand, are even more hesitant to make any 5XX updates, though a third are still converting that 502 field. Okay, so we've talked about the descriptive field changes, and now we're going to transition to talking about the access point changes, and then we'll have a quick Q&A period after that point. So nearly all libraries are choosing to update multiple place names separated by commas and the word "and" to semicolon instead. And here's another quick example to show you what I mean by that one. So back to the same question here. So the second option allows clients to be more granular with which fields to apply this to. But as you can see, almost every library that chooses this will have this applied to all X11 fields in the bib record. And this option allows changes to abbreviations such as circa to approximately, or cent to century, those kinds of changes. Nearly all libraries are choosing to do this. I do want to point out that publics are the sole type to wholeheartedly make the date changes from B period and D period to hyphens, and from FL period to active. So this department change only affects this abbreviation in X10 and X11 fields. Both academics and publics endorse this completely, and specials are not as keen to the idea. While all uniform title updates includes most of what you see in this slide, it does not include converting two languages to separate 7XX fields. So if you had a particular work in the 240 field with subfield L and it said English and Greek, for example, we could split that out into two separate 7XX fields with its own language. So that's considered a separate option. Academics are largely in favor of all uniform title updates, but not so much when it comes to converting the two languages to their own 7XX fields. But interestingly, publics unanimously chose all uniform title updates, so there's no division amongst them for that. They're a little more inclined than academics to convert those two languages into separate 7XX fields. Specials, however, they hew pretty closely to in thought and execution for updates as academics, as well as conversions of two languages for the uniform titles there. And it says convert capital L, but that's just, it's really lowercase l, but I just wanted to show you that's not a subfield 1, for example. Okay, with relator terms or relationship designators, we're primarily checking for typos or correcting certain outdated terms to their current form. So a quick example might be if it says joint author, we're changing that to author. I think as I was putting together the results for this webinar, I was kind of surprised that more libraries aren't converting subfield 4 to E. But maybe it comes down to personal cataloger's preference. Or they might think that the 4 is going to be used more often, perhaps, by the machine. But not too surprising, however, is that most libraries are holding off on including both 4 and E in the same heading. And the reason why they're probably doing that is PCC recommends against including both. So that could really be an influence right there. Many of the Bible updates that we make can actually be made globally by libraries themselves. And so we found some of our clients have already done this work ahead of time. Still, this option is one of the more straightforward updates that can be made, and nearly all types of libraries are in agreement about doing it. This one here, this is the last question for step 5 here. There's not too much to this update. Our system looks at the X100 subfield C. We then determine whether the data should be entered in parentheses or capitalized, or both. It's presumed, though, that phase 3, I think phase 3B actually of the NAS cleanup will also address the X100 subfield C subfields. And phase 3 should be starting this very week and comprise roughly 350,000 updates spread over the next few weeks. In fact, we just checked because we got the update last night from LC. We just received 41,000 updates from LC last night. And to give you I guess, a comparison there, a typical week has about 4,000 to 6,000 updates. So about 10 times that. So I think we did have a couple of questions come in here for the second Q&A period. There's a question about what about the 264? And just to let you know, we did address that as far as we do convert from the 260 to the 264. I don't know if that does answer the question or the intent behind the question there, but Let me read a couple others here. Okay, right. So a question did come up when we were talking about the 260 updates, and it wasn't clear yet that we were then converting them to 264. So again, just to emphasize real quick that we are doing that separately. We wanted to give our clients a chance to address the conversion part separately. They might still be in favor of making those other kinds of updates to abbreviations and different punctuation changes while still retaining the 260 as opposed to converting it. Another question was, are you including the subfield B coded version of the content type in 336, or is it a profile option? And it is an option on the profile, so they can include both A, the code, as well as subfield B, the term. I might have those mixed. It might be a term with subfield B code. Sorry about that. But yes, that is an option, and our default is to include both of those along with the subfield 2 RDA. And we do not, at this time, add a subfield 3 to tie it specifically to certain things within that record. There may be other questions here, but I don't see them yet. I did want to mention, as I mentioned earlier, we wanted to keep these two, the descriptive versus access point enrichment, those types of updates and options separate. Our recommendation has always been to at least include as much of step 5, which is the access point, as desirable for our clients. And the reason for that is that we can still make changes to access points to bring them in line with RDA rules and policies, even when there may not yet exist a suitable authority match for that particular heading. So it does introduce at least that sense of consistency to the access points, even when there is not an authority match yet. Okay, so let's go to the final part here, where we talk about the reports, and we'll wrap things up. For this particular question, I realized it would probably make more sense to help illustrate what the difference is between these two types of reports, between expanded and collapsed. With expanded, you may have 2 or more headings scattered throughout your bib file, and the report lists the bib ID for easy reference, so for each one of those headings. And even if the headings are identical, as you see in this case. With collapse, you can still have 2 or more headings distributed throughout the file, but the report now consolidates those headings into a single entry point, while also informing you how many records correspond to that particular heading. So you do lose the information as far as exactly how to find that within your system, but it might be easier to sort through on your side. Expanded reports are going to be much larger than collapsed reports, and most of our libraries, though, are choosing to see the bib ID reference within the reports. Our philosophy with the reports has always been we want to make sure you are completely informed as to what transpired with the processing of your records. Does this mean that we have a lot of reports? It does. However, our libraries have let us know that they find certain reports more useful than others, which is both expected and understandable on our side. It also means that other libraries consider a completely separate set of reports more useful. So we're just happy to that our clients have the option to explore and discard reports at their leisure, as it makes sense for their type of review that they want to do. To that end, we have reached nearly the final set of results to look over. These are optional RDA-specific reports. You can see there's quite a number of them. By and large, our academics are choosing to look over every available report while still gravitating towards a few key reports. And just so you know, all of these reports are available as part of the processing with no extra charge. And so we leave it up to our clients through the sample and through the testing phase to let us know exactly what they want for the full processing as well. With publics, though, they're deciding to completely ignore certain reports in favor of others. And mostly, they're only looking at standard RDA reports and passing over the optional reports almost entirely. And specials are more akin to academics in this respect. They're choosing to explore certain types of reports only, but they still find merit in the rest of the available reports. So, conclusions. I don't want to belabor the point. This is a bit of a gross oversimplification here, the previous sets of results, but yet it definitely seems like there are certain trends that appear to be evident from what we've just reviewed. In fact, I don't want to end just yet. I promise it won't go on much longer. But I wanted to quickly take a step further and look over all options that academics are choosing, where at least 90% of them are selecting those options. So there are some options where it might have been 89%. I did not include that here, just to give you a sense of what academics view as most important to them. And it's 22 of these total options that I've included here for academics. And this may be useful if you are an academic library and considering RDA enrichment on your catalog, how far you should go and how much confidence you may have based on the results from these other academic libraries that have already taken the step to go through the processing. Of course, I want to do the same thing with the publics. And there's 21 total options that publics have chosen. And I found it interesting that all of these options are listed at 100%. Social libraries, once again, may also contain academic and public libraries, but identified differently. 17 total options for specials there, but most of those are 95 or above. So the biggest advantage to RDA enrichment is providing your catalog with more consistency throughout. We are living really in a hybridized world, and providing this kind of enrichment helps users and patrons alike stay in the catalog because the results are consistent, they trust what they find. Thank you very much for your time today. I'd like to turn it over to you for any kinds of questions that may have come up. We do have a couple questions I do want to get to. Let me see. One question, and this is an excellent question here. Did you all try to write rules for adding subfield E to access points? Rules based on what is in the statement of responsibility, such as the 245C. This would be a way to add some subfield E for illustrators, translators, etc. This is an excellent question. We actually did look into that. We've been working on adding subfield E access points based on the statement of responsibility, but we wanted to ensure we get to a point where we can add them accurately and reliably before we introduce it into our programming. So we definitely looked into it, and I remember running through some prototypes that we had and trying to figure out if we were close to being able to do so. And it seems like we could add some of the more common ones like author or edited by or illustrated by or something like that. But when it ran into multiple authors within the statement of responsibility, I know that's when the system started to choke a little bit as far as confidence or reliability that we were doing everything the way that we wanted to. So it's definitely something that we still want to look into, but we don't have a reliable way to do that at this time. Let's see, here's another question here. When you talk about conversion from subfield 4 to subfield E and update on subfield C, does that mean you're checking enriched name authorities instead of stopping at subfield D only? We do match against as much of the authority as we can. We don't try to stop anywhere and just say, okay, we're going to stop at this point and that's it. So we do, if the authority has what we need from it, then we're going to go ahead and use all of it that we can. I don't know if that. So we do include as many subfields as it will. We also employ hierarchy matching. So if you have a main heading in subfield A and then you have some other subdivisions tacked onto that, we attempt to match as much of those fields as possible against the authority record. And whatever we can't match, then we lop off the end and keep trying until we can get at least the number of matches that we can. So it could be that, with the heading that contains 2 subfields, you might have 2 authority records that match that, one for the full heading and one for the main heading only. And so we deliver back to you both of those. I hope that might help answer that. Okay, another question was, does the profiling form highlight the PCC recommended options? And that's a good question. For our part, we have added our default, and I would say 90% of the time, maybe higher, they're based on PCC guidelines. But also, each one of our steps links out directly to our wiki, and the wiki contains many more examples and details and information about that particular question to help really inform you as far as what to do. And so the wiki also includes different things about PCC guidelines that we follow, and where possible, we actually ask Karen to add the PCC documents or links to the wiki, so you can go directly to that Word document or that link and figure out what the task group for that particular rule decided on. So I think that's all the questions that we have right there. I did want to, again, thank you for taking the time out of your day today to join us on this webinar and to ask your questions. I think that definitely helps us improve the services for you, as well as hopefully clarify some of the steps that we take or some of the processing that we also have in place. And thank you very much for joining us.